Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk to you about a show that I just got through watching on Hulu. I've actually knew about this show since 2019 when it was first released, but I was unable to watch it. And that show is I Am the Night, which tells the true life stories of Fauna Hodel. But this show loosely adapts the true life events that happen in Fauna's real life, as I'm about to detail to you. The show stars India Isley, which I remember from Underworld Awakening. The movie also stars Chris Pine, which everybody knows from the new Captain Kirk from the JJ movies, and he's also Steve Trevor from Wonder Woman. And he was also Ben Parker from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The show is completely written and created by Sam Sheridan, who is the husband of Patty Jenkins. Now, Patty Jenkins was the executive producer, and so was Chris Pine. This show caught my attention back in 2019 because I'm not exactly sure how. I think I was researching Patty Jenkins because back when the show was coming out, it was always presented as Patty Jenkins' show. Like when you watch the trailer, it would say from not producer, but it would say from the director of Wonder Woman and Monster. So I always assumed, that this show was created by her. And every time you will go looking online, you'll find like mostly she done like a lot of research and stuff for this show. Now, back then, I really didn't pay attention to actually who created it when I looked on Wikipedia. However, I was unable to watch it at that time, and I forget why when it came into production on TV. So then I was going to watch it on the TNT app because it's a TNT show. But I told myself I was going to watch it, and then so much time passed, and they later on took it off the app. So that sucked. So for the longest time, I could never watch this show. But then I had Hulu, and then I found out, oh wait, it's on Hulu, so now I finally get to watch this show. Patty Jenkins said this is a passion project of hers because she feels connected to the story of Fauna Hodel. And apparently, Patty has been wanting to make this show. See, once again, like I said, that's why I assume Patty made this show. Because when I looked online, it said that, she's been wanting to make this thing for the past 10 years. And so that would have been since like 2009. But back then, probably nobody, like no studio would trust her because that was way before Wonder Woman ever came out. I'm not sure when Monster came out because I've never seen it. But I'm pretty sure it didn't come out like in 2009. Or maybe it did. Who knows? But yeah, so, if you're like new in Hollywood and you haven't directed much, and you've probably been relegated to like directing like a couple of episodes and TV shows and like maybe some like smaller projects, then nobody's really gonna trust you, especially if you're a woman back in Hollywood. Things are kind of starting to change a little bit now to where they're trusting more people who don't have much experience, aka Kathy Yan of Birds and Prey, or Mark Webb with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I remember thinking to myself, I love the Wonder Woman movie. Patty Jenkins did a great job on that movie, So, like, this would be like a really great show. And for the most part, yeah, it is a good show. Like, it had me hooked and intrigued when I started watching it this week. But then I made a huge mistake when watching this show. And that mistake was, after the third episode, I just started to, actually after the first episode, I started researching it, but I didn't research it in full, and I kind of glossed over the stuff I didn't want to read because I didn't want to spoil myself. See, when I first watched this show, I assumed it was 100% fiction. And so, like, because I never heard of Fauna Hodel, like, never. And it's a reason, I'm going to get into her story later. But see, the thing is, like, so I thought the show was fiction, and so when I researched it in the first episode, I like glossed over some things, and then I started seeing links to certain people's names that they was playing. I'm just like, well, is this based off like a novel or something? So then I clicked like George Hodel, and I clicked Hodel, and I was like, holy crap, this is based off a true story. So I was like shocked and amazed, and I thought it was based off a true story. So then I'm all like, okay, wow. So everything I'm seeing in this show for like the first episode must be like 100% real, or at least like probably like 80 or something like that percent. You know, they take liberties and stuff with TV shows. And so I like, wow, man, I couldn't believe like, you know, like this was happening and then that was happening and stuff like that. But then by the time I got to the third episode, I wanted to go back online and see more about this Jay character because he was like really fascinating. And then I found out the truth that Chris Pine's character is completely 100% made up. And I'm just like, well, hold up. So that means if he's made up, then what else is made up on this show? So then I started doing some hard digging. And I was pissed off at the liberties that they took with this show, to the point to where I got to the fourth episode, I'm like, I don't care. And then so I started watching it kind of with a bad taste in my mouth. And even though like more exciting stuff was happening, I just really didn't care. And then I was extremely more pissed off to find out that the last episode is completely made up. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? And then it's like, okay, I'm really, even though I do like Patty Jenkins and I still kind of like her, I'm starting to lose faith in her because I'm starting to wonder what exactly is her style, because now she's like a household name, and so far I can't really tell what her style is when I start reading more into her and how her movies and stuff are getting made. And so then it's kind of like, I think her style really is just mimicking other styles, which can be okay in Hollywood. You know, people do that all the time. But when you constantly do that, then it starts to make you look like a copycat. I really, really, really love Wonder Woman, the movie, the live action movie. But I don't own it on DVD because I love the action more than I love everything else. And the reason why I don't love everything else is because I've seen it twice in two other movies. The first movie was Wonder Woman, the animated movie created by Bruce Timm. And that movie is far superior than the actual Wonder Woman live action movie. And that movie only had a runtime of like 80 minutes. And their third act is a whole lot better. Now, to be fair, the Wonder Woman live action third act was because of the studio, and they forced Patty to make it. Now, I do like the third act in Wonder Woman, but the third act in the animated one was a whole lot better. But for the most part, like, you know, the Wonder Woman story is synonymous with everything else, so it's kind of like, you know, I've seen it before, like I said before. I've seen it a little bit in the Wonder Woman animated movie, and I also seen it in the Justice League animated show, where Wonder Woman steals her mom's armor to go take Steve back home. And of course, this movie also the Wonder Woman borrows from Captain America, the first Avenger. It's different, but it's pretty much plot from plot, you know. But with the Wonder Woman story, especially the whole sacrifice at the end with the plane, and a little bit with the whole Howling Commandos type thing, it's just like, I get it, you know, DC's trying to catch up to Marvel, Disney, and so like, well, Warner Bros is trying to catch up with Disney, but then it's kind of like, you know, to make the live action Wonder Woman movie similar to that of Captain America was really messed up. if they were gonna copy from anything, they should have copied fully from the Wonder Woman animated movie. Trust me, that's a great movie. So then, of course, she came out with Wonder Woman 84, and let's just say that movie was less than stellar. And it started to show the kinks in Patty Jenkins' directing and creativity. She said that she left the Thor second movie because she didn't want to be placed in director's jail. But I say because of Wonder Woman 84, she needs to go to jail. But she has not went to the director's jail yet. I mean, they put Joel Schumacher in there. Why not her? You know? And now she's going to direct Wonder Woman, the third movie. And when it comes to Wonder Woman 84, it's like you can clearly see the movies she was taken from. Heaven Can't Wait. And then the action sequences she took from the Donner Superman movies and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie. And then when you do more research, you find out that with the first Wonder Woman movie, she was using Zack Snyder's pretty much like production team or creative team. She used his choreographers, she used his writers, and stuff like that. Then, of course, she fired all those people for the second movie and hired her own people, and her own people suck. Then, when it comes to this show, I Am the Night, okay, even though she didn't create it, she had a huge hand in like shaping it because she was the executive producer, and she did do a lot of research and talking to the actual real Fauna, who lived many years ago before she died of breast cancer a few years ago. So it's because so she had a helping hand, and her husband is just a little copycat himself because see, okay, the thing about this show and Fauna in real life, the story of Fauna Hodel is very mysterious, very eye-opening. It's scary, it's traumatic. You will not believe the stuff this woman went through in her life. And this show decided, okay, we're going to take the gist of what happened with her in her life, reshape it around, and make it feel like Hannibal, the TV series. And I'm a huge Hannibal fan. And when they started showing this one depiction of a bull constantly throughout the show and the way they showed it, I'm just like, you're ripping off the visual style of Hannibal with the stag. And let's put a pin in that later. And let's just get on to this show. Now, Patty's husband wrote every single last episode, but there are actually 3 directors because there are 6 episodes, and each director gets 2. Patty Jenkins, of course, is one of those directors, and she did the first 2. Actress turned director Victoria McInerney, she did episodes 3 and 4. And then Carl Franklin, he did episodes 5 and 6. Okay, so like I said before, created by Patty Jenkins' husband, Sam Sheridan. And it was executive produced by him, Patty Jenkins, and Chris Pine. Chris Pine, I like Chris Pine as an actor. He's a great actor, and he's really great in this show. But the problem I have with him is that he is shoehorned throughout this entire series the way he takes away from the main actress and the main character. This is not Chris Pine's show. But when you Google pictures for this show, I Am the Night, all you constantly see is his picture. And if you see a scene with anybody else, he's in there with them. Another problem I have with him is that because his character is completely made up, he really takes away from Fauna. Every scene he's in, he steals. Every time he's shown by himself on the show, is all about him, and it completely takes like you think you're watching 2 different shows when it comes to him. And it's kind of like, well, if Patty Jenkins and Sam wanted Chris Pine in this show so badly, they should have just gave him his own show and created that character. Because that would have been cool also. Because there was really no point in having his character in this show. But, he's Patty Jenkins' little golden boy, so she puts him in there just like she put him in Wonder Woman 84, which he had no business being in Wonder Woman 84, especially in the way he was depicted, and especially that bedroom scene. Which that bedroom scene is why I started losing a whole lot of faith in Patty Jenkins. Because she keeps doubling down on it and not apologizing for it. And so with the Chris Pine character, it's like, I get it. And when he made himself the executive producer, of course you have some like push what you want in like the show and stuff. And I guess one of those pushes was to have him more and more and more in the show. And that really pisses me off because it takes away from the actress of India Isley. Now I've only seen India, which I call her like the Fountain Youth actress because she never looks her age. She was 26 when filming this show, and she plays like a 15-year-old, or she was 25 when she filmed this show, and she looks like a actual teenager because she's so youthful and short. And then the first thing I ever saw her in was Underworld Awakening, and in that she was 18-year-old playing a 12-year-old. And she looked like a 12-year-old. It was just like freaky, So Underworld Awakening was the first thing I ever saw her in, and then the show was the second thing, because the stuff that she stars in, I don't particularly watch. Like, I'm not really into that genre of like movies. I'm not really a big movie buff. I'm more of a TV show person. But she was on like, I think, the Secret Life of an American Teenager, and I never watched that show because it was just like, just like a teen drama type thing. I wasn't really into that. I didn't really start getting into that like a little bit later, because a lot of teen dramas are actually a lot better than adult dramas and stuff. But this show should have been a big breaking point, that like solidifies her as like an actress, and a serious actress, because when I started researching her more and more, like a lot of stuff that she starred in, I've actually never heard of. And then when I looked at the scores, those movies either have mixed reviews or they just simply flop. And so it's kind of like, this would have been like her big break, you know what I'm saying? Where she could have became like a household name. But then she gets overshadowed by Chris Pine, because Chris Pine, has been acting a whole lot longer than, excuse me, has been acting a whole lot longer than she has. And, he has like learned the craft, and to where his charisma just like steals like everything, So I really want to see her in like more roles, and I was really hoping this show would be like her breakout like starring role. But Chris Pine like overshadowed her and stuff, And it's probably not his fault. It's just like he was the more experienced dude, And but like I said, her acting is like really good in this. Now, like I said before, I did enjoy this show, but then of course I spoiled it for myself and kind of ruined it. So in this review, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go by plot of the episodes, and then later on tell you the actual real life facts. Because this show takes a lot of liberties and it changes things around a lot. First, let me say the intro is mesmerizing. I really like it. I like this half black, half white person laying down. Is really interesting. I don't know who directed the intro, but they did a really good job. So the show starts off with this mysterious man. He's in his house and he's having these like wild, like old school type parties. 'Cause this was back in the 60s. And so, well, actually, the setting for this one is actually the 40s. We see a flashback, and it's this man. And this man is George Hodel. He is the antagonist of this entire series, and in real life. So it's like, he's in his house and he's having this wild party, and it's like these weird like sadistic, um, surrealist type parties that are kind of like sexual and like like a kind of like a orgy type thing, but not really. Um, it's just a bunch of women dancing around and skimpy outfits and a bunch of men ogling them, and then stuff happens, and then you see this little girl just staring at this, and that little girl is his daughter, Tamar Hodel. And this actually happened in real life. Like he actually had these type of parties, and she would like watch them, like sneak around and watch. Um, he was this famous like doctor, very wealthy, very rich, and then he got tied up in some murdery type stuff. We'll get into that later. So like the setup for this show, well, his character was kind of like, okay, like I like the way Patty's directing this. You can really feel like what's going on in this scene. And but the music in the background, something just isn't right. And then like at some point we see this man start to wear kind of like this strange mask, and it's like a bull, but it's like the actual like bull, and it's on his face, and it's just like weird and creepy, and it's kind of like, okay, like I'm intrigued, like where is this going? And so then it cuts from that, and then it goes into more like the present day, which is in the 60s. So then it flashes to the present day in the 60s, and we see India's character, but she's not named Fauna right now. Right now, she's named Patty, because that's the name given to her because she was adopted. And she was adopted by a black woman named Jimmy Lee. And we see, I'm calling Patty for now. We see Patty, getting ready for school. And, we see her loving mom, Jimmy, giving her kiss. And she goes off to school. And because this is the 1960s, there, as you know, in American time and actually pretty much around the world, there was a lot of prejudice towards black people. And we see that in this show. And I think it was really important to see that prejudice in this show and not glossed over, because in real life, the real Fauna received a lot of prejudice and hate between both blacks and whites. And so, like, okay, the show starts off with Patty. Patty doesn't know that she's adopted. She assumes that Jimmy is her mom, but she doesn't know who her dad is. And then Jimmy's been lying to her, saying that your dad was this, and then he left, and blah blah stuff like that. So when Patty is at school, we see her sitting down at a table all by herself eating. Nobody wants to sit by her. And then we see this white girl about to sit next to her, but then this other white girl tells her, no, you can't sit at that table, that's where the black people normally sit. And so then the white girl gets up and sits with the other white people, and then we see a group of black kids start to sit with Patty. It's really disheartening to see how people were back in those days, and how prejudiced and racist people were, where they only had like whites only restrooms and water fountains, and they didn't want to mix with other races, and they thought they were superior than everybody else. And it's just like, I just don't understand people's mentality back then, why they would want to believe something like that. But I am glad this show decided to show that, because instead of glossing over it. However, it would have been nice if they would have shown this a lot more, like the prejudice towards blacks and whites in this show. They do it every once in a while, and it like pops in and it pops out of a certain episode. Um, but I wanted to see it more, because the real Fauna said that she endured that her entire like childhood life, and it was very traumatic for her. Then the next scene we see Patty talking to this guy, and she's sweet on him. She likes him, She wants to start dating him and everything. Well, there's this other girl in school who likes him too. And back in them days, if one girl liked the boy, then nobody else was allowed to like them. And if somebody else did, then you got problems. And Patty, sure enough, had a problem with this one black girl. Anyways, as Patty's walking home from school, she starts to see that she's being followed by a man, a white man in a car. And she doesn't know who this man is, but when she gets home and tells Jimmy, she tells him that same white man who's been following her ever since she's been a little kid is still following her. And Jimmy's kind of just like, just like brushing it off and everything, and telling her that, white men follow like black people like all the time or something like that, because it was like back in those days. And so she starts to get suspicious, like why this man is constantly following her. Another show of prejudice and racism that we see in this show is from the cops. And I'm glad they showed this because this is something black people have to endure their entire life, especially back in the 50s and the 60s. And they still endured it, even still to this day, just not as bad as what it was back in the day. So as she's walking with that dude from school, she's walking with him at night. And so like they get approached by a white cop. And the cop does the cliche, is this man bothering you? Because of course he's black. And of course she looks white. And she's like, no, sir. And he's all like, what are y'all doing here at night? And then she's all like, is this black boy is bothering you? And she's like, no, I'm black myself. I'm mixed race. So then he shines the light in her face because he can't believe it. And then he's like, y'all need to go home. This is like a school night and stuff. So then she gets home and her mom's a little upset because, she's been out all night. And her mom's like, who you been with? And she's like, just that boy from school that she likes. She's like, you stay away from that boy and blah, 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 stuff like that. He ain't no good for you and blah, 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 stuff like that. I forget what they talk about afterwards, but it's something where she starts to get a little suspicious more about who she is and that man following her. So she's been curious, like, who is this dude and why is he constantly like following her and stuff? And so she starts to get very suspicious. Now, I should point out that Patty is a teenager at this point. She's about like 15. And she starts to realize that, maybe her mom is kind of like hiding something. Cause her mom's kind of acting weird. But her mom's being nice about it. Like, totally like chill and just kind of like blown off. So later on at night when her mom is asleep, she decides that she's going to sneak into her mom's bedroom, go in her closet, and look at her birth certificate. Because she just feels that something's not right and something's weird about her. And then so when she reads her birth certificate, she sees, it turns out that Jimmy is not her real mom. And that her real mom listed on there is a woman named Tamar Hodel. And then it's listed that her mom is white. But then it's listed that the father is an unknown black man. So Patty's just kind of like, she could not believe that she is adopted, for one, and Jimmy's not her mom. And why would Jimmy lie and stuff? So she wants answers. And the very next morning, she's just sitting there not ready for school. Her mom's like, get ready for school. So then she starts telling her, who's my real mom and who is Tamar Hodel. Jimmy walks over there and slaps the mess out of her. Telling her, you're going through my stuff, my business, blah, blah, stuff like that. And so now we start to see this kind of like abusive side to Jimmy. And so like, she tells her, like, am I adopted and stuff like that. And, Jimmy goes to the speech telling her, like, I did the best I could for you. I'm a poor black woman and I raised you the best way I could. And, I am your mother and, and stuff like that, blah, blah. But then she tells her, yeah, she did adopt her. She said that like she was a maid working in this hotel and that this white lady came up to her with a baby. And then she's talking about, how would you love to have this baby? And so at first she said no, but then the woman paid her, I think like $50 or something like that. $50 was a lot of money back in those days. And so like, then she paid her an extra $50 and then she took her. And then she talked about how like, how like scared she was to like have her because people would assume what this black lady doing with this white child. And she would just pretend that she's like the nanny or babysitter or something like that. And so she's really upset at Patty at this time because now Patty has also found out that her name is not Patty, that her name is Fauna, because it was on the birth certificate. and she tells her like, go to school or stuff like that, or don't go to work because she has to go to work because now I'm gonna start calling Fauna. Fauna works at like a hospital that's run by like nuns and stuff like that. It's one of those like religious type saint like this and that type hotels, not hotels but hospitals. Now this is both true and also fabrication. And the reason for that is because, okay, now Fauna was spied on her entire life by the same type of people she would always recognize, and it would be like different people. But then there was this one particular man who would constantly spy on her. And when she grew up, Jimmy told her that there was this one man who was pretending to be a chauffeur, and he spied on her entire life since she was a child, checking up on her. But then this man fled the country when he got involved in a murder. Let's put a pin in that later. Now, but they only showed it her being like followed as a teenager, but she said she's been followed all her life. Now, as for the adoption and birth certificate thing, this is where they took liberties. In real life, the real Fauna was told at a little age, like a child age, that she was adopted, and that what it was that Jimmy would constantly taunt her because telling her, you should call your like famous grandfather and like anytime you want and blah blah stuff like that. Because her grandfather is George Hodel. And so she's known ever since she's been like a little kid that she was adopted. But she always assumed that she was like mixed and stuff. Now, in the beginning of the show, it shows that Jimmy is nice, and Jimmy only gets pissed at her once she starts digging into her like history. Turns out the real Jimmy, her and Fauna, they had a love-hate relationship. Jimmy was always mean to her, and Jimmy was a drunk. See, Jimmy loved her because that was her adoptive daughter. But she hated the fact that Fauna was white looking. Because, it was the 1960s, and there was a lot of hate. And she would tell Fauna growing up, if people ever ask who I am, just say I'm your nanny, because I don't want you taken from me. So it's like she loves her, but she hates her at the same time. And that caused a lot of problems between those two. So while at the hospital, she's sweeping up. She's talking to her friend that she has a crush on. And she's telling him that, she just found out that, Jimmy's not her real mom. And she wants to know who she really is. So while working at the hospital, because that's the same hospital she was born in, she decides she's going to sneak around the record place and find out like who she is and like who her dad might be and who her grandfather might be, stuff like that. So she's sneaking around the hospital. She doesn't want to be seen by the nuns, and then she breaks into the record room. And so then she's looking at the file, and it shows that her grandfather is a man named George Hodel, and it has like his number there and stuff like that. And so she really wants to like talk to him and find out who her mom is and all this other stuff. So she calls him. And so he tells her, oh, I want to meet you and all this other stuff. And you should come to California because they're in Nevada. And so he's like, you should come to like California and we'll meet up. So then when she comes out the record room, she meets one of the nuns, and one of the nuns are like, oh, my child, I'm so sorry. Like, I just heard about like Jimmy. She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, she's dead. So Fauna just like, so the nun wants to pray with her, but Fauna just takes off running, and she runs all the way home. And then she's looking through the house and she can't find her mom. And then she goes outside and she hears Jimmy's voice talking to the man next door. She is pissed off. She's all like, why would you lie about something like that? And Jimmy tells her because I wanted you to feel the hurt and pain that you caused me looking into your birth certificate and want to know who your real mom is. So she tells Jimmy that, I contacted my grandfather and he wants to meet me and I'm going to find him. I'm going to find who my real mom is. And I think Jimmy tells her, you stay away from that man, like, or something like that. Or she tells something like, whatever, I don't care what you do, you just go, get out, like, just go. And so, Fauna leaves. As she's about to leave, go on the bus, she's talking to the dude she has a crush on, and, and she tells him, when I find out who I am, I'm coming back for you. And he's all like, why would you want to come back for me for? You're gonna be a rich white girl. You're gonna find out who your family is in California. You're not gonna want to come back for me. And she's like, yeah, because I like you and everything. So I just put a pin in that. And then she leaves and goes off to California. Now it's time for some facts, because like I said, the show takes some liberties. Now, Fauna does work at St. Mary Hospital. So she does work at a hospital with a bunch of nuns. However, like I said before, she knew she was adopted when she was a kid. And she worked at the hospital when she was 12. And instead of sneaking around the hospital, look at the records, a nun actually gets them for her. And so a nun takes her to a different hospital, the one that she was actually born at. And then they start to find out, more about George. And just like in the show, she does call George. However, he is now living in Asia. Okay, he has now fled the country. Remember I said Jimmy said that there was a man dressed as a chauffeur and that he was involved in some kind of murder and he fled out the country. So she wants to know, she wants to meet her mom, and he's hesitant at first to tell her where her mom is located at. But then he later on, tells her that her mom lives in Hawaii. But there's never no mention of him wanting to meet her, or she should come and meet him or stuff like that, because he's in out the country. So that's where the show took a lot of liberties when it comes to that info, because they showed that Fauna is a teenager, 15, and discovered it on her own, and stuff like that. So she calls the operator to look for a Tamar Hotel in Hawaii, and then she talks to him on the phone, and then they talk. Let's put a pin in that for now. As Fauna is at a transfer station, she is greeted by a man, and this man simply chats with her. In actuality, this is her grandfather. Now, in real life, this kind of happened, kind of didn't, but it didn't really happen this way. See, what happened was, when Fauna was much, 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 much older and married to Billy and had a kid, she was with her child and she was greeted by a older man who stood far away, and he just stared her down, but he didn't say anything to her. Then he turns away and just leaves. She didn't know who that man was until she saw pictures of her grandfather, and she realized that it was him. That was their only encounter. So after Fauna leaves, Jimmy is really upset, and we see her call a man. Now, before I get into this is where the Chris Pine character come in, and we actually see him earlier in this episode. I left him out only because, like I said, he was made up, but now it's time to talk about his character. Midway into this episode, we see him, and he dresses up as a doctor, and he sneaks into a hospital, and he's taking a bunch of pictures at the morgue of this woman. See, Jay is a photographer / reporter. He is also a man who suffers from PTSD, but back then they used to call it shell shock because he was in the army. And they set him up as this courageous man, one of those type of people that were, it was like a group of people, and they were getting slaughtered by the enemy. And then, as people was hurt, he was dragging everybody out all by himself. Like they set him up to be like a real hero, like a real Steve Trevor, because he's Patty Jenkins' little golden boy. And so like we see him and he's about to get caught, and then he sneaks into like the little refrigerated units in the morgue. And while he's in there, he starts to make noise and starts laughing because why? He suffers from PTSD and he's like really like out there in the head. The cops find him and it's not good. They beat the living crap out of him. And like this cop, we constantly keep seeing the same cop over and over. It's these dirty, crooked cops. This detective dude, and it's like he has a huge scar on his face. And so it's kind of like, okay, at this time I thought this cop dude was real because I thought Jay was real. But now after knowing that Jay is fake, then I'm just like, okay, well, oh gee, now this cop dude is fake. And also Jay's contact and mentor, who he works at the publishing place, he's fake. And then this one detective friend that's a friend of Jay who served with him in the military where Jay saved his life, he is made up. So I'm just like, God, why did you make all these people up? And then I found out that Patty said that it's weird. Patty Jenkins and there's one name and Patty, the Fauna girl. I did not realize that. Okay, so Patty Jenkins, she said that even though Jay is made up, he's a combination, or her and her husband said that he's a combination of that noir type detective journalism type style, and that he is a combination of multiple people who was working around the case of like the whole Fauna thing and the George thing, and this woman who I had not mentioned yet, named the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, and her murder. So he's a combination of like all these people just like smushed into one. But then the thing is kind of like, okay, why not just create those actual characters and put them in the show instead of creating this like golden boy type character? And I'll put a pin in that later. Actually, you know what? Screw a pin. I'm going to say it now. So Sam, the creator of this show, said that they needed somebody. They needed like this type of person that kind of like helps Fauna along on her like journey of trying to discover who she is. And he's supposed to help connect the dots and this tread line. And they needed like that strong character type person. Basically what it is, they needed a strong male character so that I guess guys can root for like somebody in this show, because they didn't think Fauna would be like a strong enough character on her own. But once you read the stuff that happens in the real Fauna's life, you can clearly see she could have handled this whole show on her own. Now, I will get into that part later, because I do have a problem, like I said, with this show and how they depicted the real life events a little bit later. So after he gets bailed out by his friends, he's back in his apartment place and he's about to commit suicide when he gets a phone call. It's from Jimmy Lee, like I mentioned before. She tells him, that George Hodel person you was investigating years ago, you need to reinvestigate him again and stuff. And so, because what happened was this. The real George Hodel, he was investigated for the death of a woman by the name of Elizabeth Short, but she went by the stage name of the Black Dahlia. And her murder shook waves throughout the entire nation, not just because she was murdered, but how she was murdered. See, now it's never been proven that he actually did this. He was only investigated. The way, okay, this is part gonna be very gruesome, so prepare your eyes. I've tried to like blur out some stuff so it won't like gross you out too much. But this is how she was. She was decapitated. She was cut in two. Her breasts were removed, and she had a Glasgow smile on her face. What that is they take a sharp object like a knife, and they cut you from the corner of your mouth to your ear, to where it makes it look like you're constantly smiling. Now you have to remember, this was back in the old days. Back then, stuff like this rarely happened. And then if they did happen, like people end up dying, but they don't end up dying like this. And it was extremely gruesome. And it just was just unheard of, like back in those days, you know? And then of course you start to get more like copycats. And nowadays, but not something that's gruesome like that. And so the reason why he was investigated was because, okay, when it comes to Tamar, I didn't mention this part, but it turns out that he had an incestual relationship with his daughter at a very young age through her teenage life, constantly messing with that little girl. And she went to trial for that. And she said he did this and he did that to her. Now, her step grandmother, or maybe her grandmother, no, it might have been her step grandmother, it was his second wife. She lied to the judge and said that Tamar is a pathological liar. Because of that, she got sent to a detention facility, and he was dropped of all charges. Now, the reason why they believe he was connected to the Black Dahlia murder is because, like I said, back in those days, things like this was unheard of, and they didn't have the technology that they had nowadays, or cameras around everywhere. Also, DNA samples, people really didn't use those back in the day, because DNA just wasn't a thing back in those days. It wasn't even really a thing in the 90s, to tell you the truth. Like, people didn't think about linking that to like certain murders or like other stuff like that. But when they heard of his incestual trial, they assumed that, okay, well, if he did that, then maybe he committed this murder too. Why they would assume that? Like, I don't know. You know, it was just a different time back in those days. They just always assumed things. Like I said, things like this rarely ever happen. And also, another reason why is because when they started suspecting him because of the whole incest thing, they started to tap his like I think like his phone, bug his house and stuff like that. And one of the people said that who tapped him said they heard him literally say, "I could have killed the Black Dahlia. Nobody would ever find out." Something. He just started rambling this like weird like stuff, like kind of confessing to it and not. So that's why they assume he was connected to the Black Dahlia thing. And so, like, when he was accused of that, and he was later charged with the murder, those charges were later dropped, and then he fled the country. Another reason why they suspected he did it was because, okay, there was like rope burns, cut marks, and like other stuff all over her body. But there was no blood whatsoever at the crime scene. So they assume that she was tortured and murdered someplace else, and then she was later cleaned up and had literally all the blood drained from her body. And of course, with him being a doctor, they assumed that only a doctor could perform that decapitation and the draining of the blood. So Jay assumed that, you know, he needs to reinvestigate this dude. Because the thing about Jay is the one reason why he's not so trusted is because, just like in real life, George would sue the police departments, the newspaper people, for everything he was charged with after he was like cleared and everything. And he won all those cases too. So when Jay tells, like, you know, his mentor, boss dude, like, you know, I'm about to reinvestigate this dude, he's all like, no, don't, and he's like, no, don't do it, you know, we can't, because you'll get sued again, and we'll get sued. And he's all like, look, I can prove that this dude murdered her and everything. And so one way he tries to find information out is through George's second wife. And Fauna is trying to find out information about her grandfather as well. So when Fauna arrives in California, she's greeted by her cousin from, like, you know, Jimmy's side of the family, Jimmy's niece. Because that's who she interacts with most of the time when she's in California. And so when they're on the bus, they see a black lady trying to like get on the bus, but the white driver won't let her because she didn't have enough money. So there's one guy, and everybody's like, just let her on the bus, I'll pay for it. Well, that don't sit too well with the white driver. And next thing you know, this dude is getting the crap beat at him by the cops. And stuff like this used to happen a lot in like the back in the day. Like it was just like a huge hate towards like this one race and everything, like this huge race war and stuff. It's like they try to solidify their dominance by keeping the black man down, or the black people down, I should say. So I do like how they like filmed and shown like this prejudice and hatred, and like I said, then like never gloss over it. But I kind of wish they would have showed it a little bit more, and a little bit more with the Fauna character, because like the woman said in real life, she endured this her entire life, and not just by white people, but blacks as well, because here she is pretending that she's mixed, and they are like, oh, you too light skinned to be like this and that. Oh, something else I wanted to point out. The real Fauna, when she was growing up, like I said, she was always told that she was mixed. And she always wondered, why isn't her skin dark? So all her like child and teen life, she was just like waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for her skin to darken, and it never did. So then when she later found out as an adult that she is white, then she kind of started like digging into her past. But the show shows her digging into her past as a teenager. So she goes to her grandfather's house, and he's not there. So she don't know where to go. So she goes to Big Mama's house. Now, Big Mama is her grandmother, and it's Jimmy's mother. And that's where her cousin stays, and her other cousins and stuff. Like, Big Mama just has a big house, and she lets everybody in. Big Mama's a sweet woman. She's nice, she's sweet, she's caring, and we see that throughout the show. So she's a real, like, confidant to Fauna. One thing they do not show is Big Mama is very religious, and she teaches Fauna all about God, but they don't show that in the show. And that would have been a nice thing to show, like a nice little touching thing. But they did depict Big Mama in a good way, so that was a good, way that they took that, showing that she is a caring, sweet, kind-hearted woman. Now, while Fauna is in California, she's constantly being pursued by that same man we see in episode 1, and that man name is Ship. Ship is made up. He's George's right-hand man, but he is constantly following her throughout this series. Now, while in California, her cousin, whose name I forget, but she's a female cousin, and she takes Fauna to like this like black party at these people's house. And it's there she meets two guys. One guy is named Nero. Nero is one of those guys who thinks he's like a little pretty boy, think he can have all the women, and constantly pursues women. And we meet Nero's friend, Terrence. Now, Terrence, I can't find no real information on him. However, when I'm searching for this, I found the picture of the real life Fauna and her husband, Billy. And well, her husband at that time, and Billy and the Terrence actor look identical almost. They're both tall, they're black, so I'm assuming that Terrence was standing for like the Billy person, because everybody on this show has the name of the person that was real life, from real life and stuff, but there are a few people whose names got changed. And one of those people is Fauna's step grandmother. We'll get into her a little bit later. So they're at this party, and Terrence and Fauna are talking, and she kind of gives him like a little bit of a look, but that's about it. But there's really like no real like connection between the two. Plus, her cousin likes Terrence, and so they're talking about this and they're talking about that, but it's not really all that important. So when Fauna couldn't get in contact with her grandfather, she decides to look up Somehow she finds the number of his step, I keep saying his step, her step grandmother, George's second wife. And so when she contacts her, she tells Fauna that well, her name is Karina, I should say. I forgot to mention that. I'm like a little scatterbrained right now, like early in the morning. Sorry about that. Anyway, so Karina, she tells Fauna, stay away from George. He's dangerous, and like all this other stuff. Now, this happens when she gets into California and she first tries to like meet George but couldn't. So she ends up calling Karina the next day because she wants to find out more about George. But then Karina's pretending like she doesn't know who Fauna is and that she never spoke to her. And it's the same woman, the same voice. But anyway, she agrees to meet with Fauna. So Fauna makes her way over to her place, which is like this big, like rich, like white neighborhood with mansions and stuff. And Karina, she's very odd, very strange, and very mysterious. Like, she always acts like she's not completely there in the head. And this is because the Karina lady is like an alcoholic. And chances are, since it's the 60s, she's probably doing a little drugs too. And so she's always acting like she's not there. And then whenever, like, she spends pretty much the whole day with Fauna, telling her things, but she's not telling her what Fauna really wants to know. She keeps alluding and kind of like beating around the bush and talking about like other stuff. But this actress is like very mesmerizing. Every time she talks, it's kind of like, she's not giving her the answers that she wants, and she keeps like going around the corners with those answers, and you just kind of like go with it because she's so mesmerizing. And so then it's kind of like, okay, well, then Fauna asks her, where's her mom Tamara at? And Karina tells her that, Tamara is dead and everything. So Fauna is like really upset, and she keeps asking about her grandfather. And so like once again, the lady's just like beating around the bush. But then at the end of the day, when she's back in the car, and then she drops Fauna off at the bus station because she doesn't want to be seen in a black neighborhood. Back in those days, white people didn't want to be seen in black neighborhoods, and black people didn't want to be seen in white neighborhoods. Because if a white person is seen in a black neighborhood, then it's like, oh, you must love black people and stuff. And then if a black person is seen in a white neighborhood, well, they get the crap beat out of them and assume that they're trying to steal something. And so, then Fauna asks Karina, well, who's my father and everything, and then she's all like, oh, your father. I think she said something about her father was like something else, and then she tells her, what did he look like or something. It's something I forget exactly what, but she tells her something, and then Fauna says something, and then Karina's all like, oh, dear child, you're not mixed, you're white. And then Fauna's just like, what? She's like, no, I saw my birth certificate. It says unknown black man. She's like, well, it might have said that, but your father was a white man. Fauna gets like really upset and tells her she doesn't believe her. She just like storms out the car and goes to the bus stop. And it's kind of like, this is kind of interesting because it's kind of like, she's getting some answers and she knows she's not getting them all, and she's not really believing this woman, but then she gets like really pissed when she finds out that she's actually white, and there's like kind of like a reason for that. Fauna was pissed finding out that she was white is because even though she's been picked on her entire life, like her adoptive parents call her white Patty. Jimmy didn't like the fact that she was white. Black and white kids constantly like picked on her. The thing about the real Fauna is that she just wanted to belong somewhere. She just wanted to be accepted. She wanted to have a place in life. And all she's ever known was black people. Like, that's all she's ever known since she's been a child, all the way into her adult life. she's only known like black people. And for the most part, even though black people treated her like crap, her family treated her really good. Her grandmother, Big Mama, treated her great. Her cousins treated her great. There were even times when Jimmy Lee treated her nice. And Jimmy Lee's husband from Common Law, he was a shoe shine man. Now we don't see him in the show, but he treated her nicely. And it's just like she's just, and when she found out she was white, it's because she said that she just wanted to be a black girl. That's all she ever wanted to be, because that's who she's always been around, you know? And so when her character in the show found out that she was just white, she was just like pissed because she just didn't want to be white. Now, when you look at pictures of the real Fauna as a teenager, you can clearly tell that the girl is white. She doesn't look mixed at all. But for the actress India, for some reason, they darkened her skin a little bit to give her a tan. I guess it's to show that, Jimmy wanted to like fool people and thinking she was mixed, so she gave her a tan and stuff. Now, the real Fauna, when you look at her as an adult, she does look like she's mixed with a little something. And that's because George is Russian and Jewish. So you can see the Jewishness in Fauna's like real face when she got older and stuff. And I guess people are mistaking that for like biracial, like black and whiteness. In real life, Karina is real and she's not. The portrayal is a real life person, but the name is fake. They changed it for the show for some reason. Now, she was the second wife of George, but her real name was Dorothy. And she was kind of like an artist. She was a drunk, but her art came in film and radio. And Dorothy is the one who lied to the judge and said that Tamar was a pathological liar. She did this because she did not want George to go to jail. Why is unknown to this day. So it's like, so that's why Karina is kind of like drunk and aloof, because that's how like Dorothy was like, in like real life. And the reason why. So at this point, Fauna is just like upset, and she doesn't believe that she's white, and she also doesn't believe that her mom is dead, because when she was at Karina's house, she heard a noise, so she assumes that Tamar might be in the house. So the next day, she sneaks on back over there, and while Karina is gone, she sneaks into her house, and she's looking all around, she's searching, and she finds like dated mail from Tamar, because Tamar has been writing Karina, and the mail is very recent, so she knows her mom is now alive. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ship, sneaking around the house, trying to like kidnap Fauna, but then Karina comes back. When Fauna runs out the house, we see Jay is spying on Karina's house, because he's now looking into information about the incest trial of George and Tamar and the murder of Black Dahlia. And when we see him spying on Karina, we see Karina is just talking to Ship, like all like nonchalant. So she knows him. So this is kind of like weird, like what's going on here, But Fauna doesn't know anything about this. In fact, Fauna and Jay probably don't meet until about like the third episode. So like Fauna's walking away from Karina's house, and then Ship later on, oh no, what is it? Jay approaches her in the car, and he's trying to like talk to her, but she's just weirded out. She's just like, she don't want nothing to do with him, and she's just trying to get away from him. Then as she's trying to like get away from him, she sees Ship in his car, and she recognizes Ship because when she was in Karina's house, she looked around the corner and she saw Ship. So, and then she also recognized him from, like the dude who's always following her since she's been younger. So she decides, okay, I'm just gonna go with Jay because he seems to be a little bit more friendlier than the Ship dude, because Ship scares the crap out of her. and I forget what they talk about, but I don't know. I just forget. It don't really matter because he's made up, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, at some point when Fauna gets back to Big Mama's house, she gets a phone call from Nero, the dude from the party. And he's constantly telling her, oh, you're gonna be my woman and this and that, I'm gonna do this and this to you, just talking to her all like sleazy and nasty and pervy and stuff. And so she hangs the phone up on him, and she tells Big Mama, and she tells her cousin, it was Nero, and how he get the number, and all this other stuff. Well, later on in that episode, what happened is that he ends up calling her again, doing the whole sleazy thing once again. And so we see Ship a couple of feet away listening to him on a device. When we see Terrence again, he goes to Big Mama's house. And then when Fauna goes back to Big Mama's house, Terrence is upset. And the reason for that is because now Nero has been murdered. And Fauna's cousin tells her that Nero's tongue was cut out his mouth and tied in a knot. And and Terrence is all like, this is always happening to the black people, and it needs to stop, and all this other stuff. And why would they do this to Nero? Fauna knows that it probably has something to do with her. She believes that Nero was killed because of her, because she's been told, her grandfather's this dangerous man, and that, she's constantly being pursued by Ship and everything. So when Terrence leaves, like, we see his car is completely empty, and then he gets in his car. Then all of a sudden he turns his head and Fauna's in the car. And she's all like, she can't stay at Big Mama's house because she doesn't want to risk their lives. And that she feels that Nero's death was because of her, because, and this and that. And so she asks Terrence, can she just stay with with him. And so he tells her, yeah, she can spend the night, and nothing happens between those two, like nothing at all. Like, it's just completely nonchalant, and he sleeps on the couch and she sleeps in his bed. But then she asks, can she use his phone to call somebody, and that she'll pay him for the charges. I believe she calls Jimmy. I'm not sure, because Jimmy lives out of town. And then if she was gonna call Karina, then why wouldn't you still have to pay? But then again, phone systems were different back then, so I'm not really sure. But I do remember, okay, this is what I do. I do remember that she does call Jimmy, and she tells Jimmy some stuff that's been happening. And Jimmy's all like, well, where you at right now? You at some man's place? So yeah, I think it is Jimmy, since it's a long distance call. And she tells Fauna, I'm coming to California, and all this other stuff. Now, in actuality, Nero, I believe, is substituted for Fauna's real life cousin Johnny. Now, I don't recall ever seeing Johnny in this show. And I don't ever recall Johnny being killed. Now, she does have a cousin in the show, but it's depicted as a female. But she also has other siblings too. Now, in real life, the real Fauna, when she was married to Billy, she believes that her phone was being tapped because she would always hear like an echo in the phone, or like this little weird noise whenever she dial out, because she's been followed her entire life. Now remember, I told you she's been investigating her past since she was a child, and she didn't start finding out more stuff until she was an adult, and by this time she was married with a kid. So she's about 24 or so. And so her and Billy, her husband, who I believe is the Terrence character, her cousin Johnny had called her one day, and he was acting very pervy on the phone, talking about calling her like this and that, and all the stuff he wants to do to her. She was weirded out by that because he never acted that way, and he's never spoke to her that way. But of course, back then she thought she was part of that family. She thought she was mixed, and it turned out she was white. So when he found this out, he's probably like, well, "Hey, we're not really related, so what's up?" But then she doesn't think anything about it. She tells him, you can come and visit. Now, if he's all here acting all pervy to her, why is she gonna tell him that he can come and visit? You know what I'm saying? But he never came to visit. Turned out he was murdered shortly after. His lower extremities was chopped off and shoved in his mouth. So this freaked her and her husband out to the point where they really started to suspect that not only they being spied on, but it could have been her grandfather or one of her grandfather's people that did this, because he was making advances to her over the phone. And De Niro character was making advances about her over the phone as well. And he ended up murdered. So it's kind of like, why create the character Nero? Why not just create her cousin and depict it in real life events? Like, why change and alter all this stuff? I mean, they have the rights to tell her story, and all these people that's in this show are now dead in real life. So why not just show the real story and change a little here and there, but not so dramatically? I don't understand why they did this with this show. Like, it would have been so much better if they just would have told the true life events and not have it loosely based off something. Now, at some point in time, Fauna and Terrence go to where Nero was murdered and body was found, because he's grieving, because that was like his really close friend, and he's drinking. He's trying to give her some, and he pours like alcohol, I think, on like down below. It's like this little, it's kind of like a little construction type area type thing. I forget what they call these things. Not a chasm, but like a quarry, probably, something like that. And he's pouring like the alcohol down there, and it splashes like on a man, a homeless man. And this man's all like, what you doing in my home and stuff like that. And so the man tells him, he's sorry, this is where his body was found. He's like, yeah, I know, I saw the thing, like this man killed him and stuff and dumped his body here. So I forget what happened. One thing I wanted to point out is that in this show, Fauna's appearance changes. When she thought she was mixed, she dressed more like a black woman, with her hair up and more like clothes that a black person will wear during that time. Once she discovers that she's white, her appearance completely changes in the show. She wears her hair down now. She starts to dress in more fancier clothes. To like blend in better, because now she's starting to accept her whiteness and stuff. What confuses me is that, where did she get all these new fancy clothes at? Because she didn't have these before, and her family could never afford them, and Karina never gave them to her. So it's like, Now back to this whole Karina phone call thing. Remember, I got her and Jimmy confused as to who Fauna called that night at Terrence's place. And I don't believe they talked on the phone, her and Karina. What it was, I think Karina sent her like a telegram type letter thing, telling her to come to her art show. And so now we're about like the third and fourth episodes. And so this is one that was directed by Victoria. I have to say, for an actress turned director, Victoria actually does a better directing job than the other two. I mean, the other two do a good job too, don't get me wrong, but I like the style in which Victoria takes more than Patty's. Patty's is a little flat at times, and then it builds up something juicy. But let's get to this more episode. So she goes to Karina's art show, and it's all this weird surrealism and sadistic type art. Some of it is not Satan, but sadism, I think they'll call it. Satan masochism or some way you call it like that. but it's just like this weird type art where it's always like women's bodies or like decapitated like arms and limbs here and there and twisted certain different ways, and it's just peculiar, weird type art. Um, and so so she's there and she sees Karina. Karina's laying down with a dress, and you can feel like the vibe that was directed in this episode when it comes to like Karina and her art, and with the music playing and the stillness of the camera, and then how it moves around, and then it's like the thing is like Karina is like this woman laying down in a pink dress, and then every once in a while people will hand somebody scissors, and then the people will come and they will cut like a slit in the dress. I'm not really sure what this is supposed to symbolize, but whatever. And just the way it was just like film was like just very like good and stuff. And so it gets to everybody, and everybody's just cutting a slit. Then it gets to Fauna. Fauna's like creeped out. She doesn't understand what's going on. And with all this stuff that's going on in her life, she decides she doesn't want to do it. So then she starts talking to Karina afterwards, and her and Karina are like talking and stuff. And Karina's being her weird, druggy, alcoholic type, talking, mesmerizing type self. And I think maybe Fauna tells her about Nero dying. I'm not really sure. And so they talk some more. And like I said, Karina's one of those type of people who beats around the bush. And when she does, you just kind of go with it because she's so mesmerizing. And so you just kind of just like whatever. And then we start to see Ship is there. So as Fauna's like walking around, because she doesn't know he's there yet, he bops her in the head. And then he has this strange mask. And the mask that he has is one of the type of mask that George has at his little risque parties, I guess you could call it. And so it's like he has a knife and he's getting ready to kill her. And then in comes the golden boy hero. In comes Jay. And him and Ship, they struggle and they fight. And it's a great fight. I love the way Victoria choreographed this. Patty could take some lessons on how to choreograph action, because in Wonder Woman 84, yeah. And then when it comes to the first Wonder Woman movie, we know that was Zack Snyder's team that helped her with that. So, yeah. I'm kind of looking kind of scared for this new Star Wars show that Patty is supposed to create. Anyways, so Jay ends up killing Ship. This is where things take a really interesting turn. Do you remember when I said Jay suffers from PTSD? So he's constantly having like these visions, and after he kills Ship, he constantly keeps seeing him in his dreams, and he has these really vivid dreams and stuff. And so what's really interesting about this is that after the murder, he's all, we need to hurry up and go. But before they can do that, these people come down here who are drunk, and they know Fauna, and they're like, oh, hey, Fauna, how you doing, blah, blah, stuff like that. And then they leave. They're like, oh, well, we didn't know that y'all was using this place to get like busy, so they left. And so Jay's all like, let's just leave and just leave the body here. And Fauna's like, no, we can't leave the body here. These people saw my face. They saw your face. They know my name. And then she starts like panicking. She's like going back and forth, like walking back and forth. She's like, we have to hide the body. And no, we have to cover up the body or something like that, or dispose of it. And I'm just thinking to myself, is this the same character we're talking about? She's talking about disposing of the body. I'm just like, where did this come from? Where did this character shift come from? I'm like, I know her grandfather is like a bad man, but like it must have ran in her genes as well. And I'm just like, where did this come from? It was just like completely out of nowhere, because she was never depicted as being like that type of person before. And like I said before, this is 100% made up. No man tried to kidnap her in real life. There is no Jay character. Therefore, he did not kill this like right-hand man of like George. None of this never happened. So like they drag his body out to like his car, and she's like, I know a place where we can dump the body. And I'm just thinking, who is this woman? Like, she did not act like this before. And so where they dump him at is the same place where he murdered Nero and left his body. Because she figured, like, people will find it, but nobody can tell it's them. So Jay cleans the knife off to get the prints off it and stuff like that. And so then he takes her back to his place because he's now drunk. And he also gets high on crack. So he's sleeping it off. And she spends the night with him. Nothing kinky happens, like nothing like that. And then I think but yeah, like I said before, she remembers him because he was the dude who tried to save her from ship to begin with. So now she trusts Jay and everything. And so let me cut to this part about when I said this show started to be like Hannibal. This show started off being just like this nonchalant mystery type show. This girl trying to find out her past. Then all of a sudden, by the third and fourth episode, it turns into like Hannibal, the TV show. And not only that, but remember when I said I don't understand Patty Jenkins' style and how she always takes from other properties, and how I said her husband apparently does like the same thing too? It shows in this. Okay. When we see the Jay character, remember I said he has PTSD and he has hallucinations. We constantly see a bull throughout the entire show with him. And when we see this bull, the music changes to this loud, like ominous type music. Because he's like hallucinating. And we see like this bull. And we constantly see this bull throughout the entire series now when it comes to him. And I'm just like, when I first saw this, I'm just like, this reminds me of Hannibal in The Stag. And I'm just like, could Sam have stolen this from the Hannibal show? Okay, so what you don't know is this. In the Hannibal show, there is a detective named Will. Wait, is his name Will? I think it's Will. Yeah. Named Will. And Will is a very, very good like type of forensic type person who helps solve murders. And in this show, they depict him to the visual style of Hannibal is very striking and very different. You don't really see that in many TV shows that Brian Fuller created, and it's completely different from the Hannibal movies. What it is that Will likes to take himself out of reality and places himself in the killer's body as they commit the murders. The music changes, the tone changes, and he's narrating. That's that visual style for that. And it causes Will to just turn crazy in the head because he's taking on too many murder cases, trying to figure out who is this killer. And this killer, there's several different killers in the Hannibal show, but the overall main one is of course Hannibal himself, but nobody knows that at this time. And so it's like with Hannibal, Will suspects that Hannibal might be like this killer, and Will is constantly seeing a stag. The stag shows up throughout the entire series. It follows him. It just starts to be like a regular stag at first, but then when he starts to suspect that Dr. Hannibal Lecter might be this killer, then the stag face manifests into Hannibal Lecter face, and it starts to take on a humanoid body. And then the stag represents Hannibal Lecter, this presence that's always over Will. Like, it's that missing puzzle piece to like the bigger overall picture. Like, it is just constantly following him throughout his life. Like, he knows something is wrong with this man, and he knows it somehow everything is tied back to him, but he just can't quite figure it out because Hannibal is this very charming man, this very well respected doctor. And so people aren't really assuming that he is the man going around killing people, eating people. He's the man influencing other crazy people and causing them to kill people as well. And so that's the whole thing about this whole stag, is the presence of Hannibal Lecter, constantly following Will, to the part of like insanity. So like with the bull, I'm constantly seeing the bull around, and sometimes the bull will change colors to red, and I'm just like, well, what is the significance about this whole bull thing? And so when I was researching that, apparently Sam said that George Hodel likes he had tons of bulls throughout like his entire house, and he had tons of well actually he had tons of what them things called, like, like heads mounted on like a wall, like animal heads. And but there was like different animal head, but one of them was like a bull. And so he just took that and just ran with it. And he said that the bull represents the evil in all of us. However, the bull is only shown for one character in the show and one character only. Well, actually two, but mostly it's only shown for one character, and that character is Jay. So if the bull represents the evil that's in all of us, why is it in Jay? Because Jay is not a bad guy. Jay is a hero of this show. Now, the bull does show up one other time with one other person on one other scene, and that is George, when George was a little boy playing the piano. He played it very well. See, in real life, let me get to that later. But anyway, George was playing the piano, and his instructor said that he's gifted, but he's never going to be like a real pianist. Like, he doesn't have the true talent it needs to be playing the piano. He needs to do something else. I mean, he should take up art or something like that. So George overheard this on the steps, and in the background there is the bull and that ominous music. And so it's letting you know that the bull is connected to George Hodel. That's the only time we see the bull with George Hodel, I believe. The other times we only see the bull with Jay. And so it's kind of like, if this supposed to represent the evil in mankind, why is it always around Jay? That don't make no sense. But when you look at it, Jay is technically Will from the Hannibal show. The stag is always following Will. The bull is always around Jay. You see where I'm getting with this? Also, it's never really depicted what George Hodel was really like in real life. In this show, he acts very like Hannibal. Not the Hannibal from the movies, but the Hannibal from the TV show. Now, the depiction of Hannibal is completely different from the show and the movie. In the movie, he's more like chilling and like eerie, and he's more just a little manic in him. Like, he's like the cartoony kind of villain, but in this really professional kind of way. In the show, he's very still. He's very cold. He's very calculated. He's very precise. He doesn't show a lot of expressions. He's very charming. And he's charming all up until the point to when he kills you. And even when he kills you, he'll use force, but it's still in a cold, calculated type manner. It's never really in a bizarre, kind of like kill you kind of way. George Hodel in the TV series is just like Hannibal in the TV series. He's very still. He's very cold. He's very calculated when he talks. He's very precise. His movements are very precise as well. Even when he playing around with a knife is very like still and like ominous in a way. But then when he kills you in a very slasher hackery type way, which we'll get to later on. So it's kind of like, I feel like Patty and her husband just saw the Hannibal show, like, oh, we like this, and let's do this. And I get that. People steal visual styles all the time. When The Matrix came out, everybody was copying bullet time. Everybody was slowing things down. Everybody was wearing trench coats. But after a while, people stopped doing that. And then when they did start doing bullet time again, they sped it up to where it looks different. Like it's the same thing that was created for The Matrix, but just different, you know? So I get that. But when you constantly take stuff from other projects, then it's kind of like you're nothing but a copycat. So this is why I'm starting to lose faith in Patty Jenkins a little bit. So later on that night, Fauna goes to a kind of like a bar, and she sees Jimmy Lee singing. So Jimmy Lee walks to her table, And Jimmy goes on about like how she once sung there like years ago, and Sammy Davis Jr. said, you know, he was gonna like make her famous and all that stuff, but of course never did. Did that really happen? I don't know. So then she starts asking Fauna, where you been? Have you been shacked up? And Fauna tells her about the man who used to follow her back in Mississippi. Oh, by the way, this show took some more liberties. Instead of Nevada, they lived in Mississippi, the South. So then Fauna starts to ask about her grandfather. And she asks, Jimmy, do you know him? Because when she talked to him on the phone back in Georgia, or Mississippi, or where, Mississippi, he called Jimmy by her last name. So she constantly keeps asking. And you know, Jimmy leaves smiling. She's like, come in, come in. Then she just slaps the taste out her mouth. And she said she'd rather see Fauna dead than ever have that man mark her and all this other stuff, and that she needs to come home and, you know, and stop trying to pursue and trying to find her grandfather. And Fauna gets upset and tells her, you know, you can't keep me from the truth, and then they leave. Or she leaves. So the next morning, when Fauna and Jay are talking, he starts to sober up a little bit from his PTS dream of Shep. I think they talking about how, like, you know, they're both looking for the same thing. They're both looking for George Hadell, but most importantly, they're looking for Tamar. And because I think Jay tells her he's trying to connect her grandfather to the Black Dahlia murder, and he needs Tamar. He needs to talk to her for that reason. And so, and then of course, you know, Fauna wants to find Tamar because that's her mom. And so she tells him, you know, that she found some mail that was dated not too long ago, and that Tamar is living in Hawaii. And so next thing you know, Jay's like, all right, I'll arrange it so we can go to Hawaii. And so, like, you know, the next day, Fauna is at Big Mama's house, and Jimmy's there, and everybody's there, and her and Jimmy are talking more. And her cousin comes in and tells her, Fauna, there's a white man looking for you and everything, and he's here. Jimmy is pissed. She don't like the sound of that at all. And so, you know, Jimmy goes to confront her. Also, her cousin confronts her about Terrence and how Fauna spent the night. But she tells her, you know, ain't nothing went on between them two. It is not like that at all. And she has a boyfriend back at home. And because her cousin likes Terrence, and she's all like, and you know, they quickly, like, you know, get over that. But Jimmy is pissed at what's his name, Jay, just for showing up at the house because he's a white dude and he's looking for her teenage daughter. And you know, Jay's still out of it because he sniffs crack and drinks and he has PTSD, and he's just kind of like, all right, Fauna, I got the plane tickets to Hawaii, let's go. And Jimmy's all like, oh, no, you are not. Like, who you are? You know, this is like a 15-year-old girl, and you're taking her to a foreign country. And my child will not go nowhere with you. And blah, 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 and blah, 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 and stuff like that. And throughout this whole time, and Jimmy's just going crazy on him, he never tells her who he is. And if he just would have said his name, Jimmy would have shut up, because Jimmy called him and we got him reinvested in the George Hadell case and stuff. So, like, you know, he leaves and so gets in his car, and Fauna just goes to her room. And so Jimmy's like all upset, but then Jimmy's all like, wait a minute, she's been in her room for a little too long. She goes to her room, boom, windows open, and Fauna is gone. Her and Jay are now on their way to Hawaii. Now, there's one thing that kind of weirded me out a little bit about this. I've always wondered, where did Jay get the money to get 2 round tickets to go to Hawaii? Not only that, but Fauna is 15 in this show. So how exactly did he get her a ticket and all that? I've never flown. So I know you need like a passport to go some places. I think like the foreign countries and stuff. But still, how did he able to travel with this person who's not related to him and stuff? But then I figure, okay, well, if he's from former military and PTSD, maybe he gets like a retirement check. and probably like God, what's that thing called? Your VA. Maybe he gets that. But then he lives in a crappy place, so it's like, does he get that much? And he's a photographer and reporter, so he clearly has a job. So it's kind of like, why does he need that if he gets like VA and stuff? So I don't know. Times were different back then. But then I was wondering because I remember when I was researching this. This is the part where I started getting pissed, and I just started like zoning out of the show because when I found out he was made up and all this other stuff was taking liberties. Remember when I said when she called George on the phone? This is real life Fauna. When real life Fauna called George on the phone and he had fled to like Asia and all this other stuff. He said Tamar was in Hawaii. And remember when I said the real Jimmy told Fauna that there used to be this white chauffeur man, and then he used to follow her, and then he stopped. He fled the country to like another country and stuff because of that murder. Okay, this all happened in real life in the 50s when Fauna was like younger. And I always wonder why do they keep calling Hawaii a foreign country? Like, isn't Hawaii part of the United States? But I'm all like, okay, wait a minute, Hawaii wasn't always part of the United States. So what's like the deal? You know what I'm saying? And so like George in real life, he moved to Hawaii in 1950 to avoid all these murders and stuff. But Hawaii didn't become a part of America until 1959. So that's why she said, he fled to like a foreign country and stuff like that. But the show takes place in the 60s, so now Hawaii is part of America. Now we're in episode 5. And this is when I started to like really just like, zone out the show. Because I was furious when I found out like the show took so many liberties, changed things around, and the whole Jay character is completely made up. Because like I said before he met Fauna in episode 3, there was so much screen time giving to the Jay character, Chris Pine's character. They went all like, it's just like whenever he took up a scene, he stole the whole show. They even went as far as to give him a huge backstory. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, he's a main character, but why do we need to be invested so much into him? Why do we need to know so much about him when this whole show is about Fauna and her real life mystery and stuff? And that just started pissing me. So I just started like watching the show with like hate eyes after this point. Cause it left a bad taste in my mouth. It was still good, but I was just so disappointed. So him and her in Hawaii, and they're trying to find Tamar. And it's kind of hard because she doesn't really come and get her mail no more. And so when they're at the little bar, they're talking, and there's a bunch of like sailors there. Sailors, of course, American sailors. And of course, it's being in the 1960s, you kind of figure how they used to act back then. So they're talking, Jay goes to the restroom. And one of the sailors, he's drunk and he's trying to like hit on Fauna. Now, remember, Fauna's a little 15-year-old girl at this time. And the soldier boy is like all hitting on her. And then he's kind of like touching her in the arms a little bit and just getting all in her face. And she's uncomfortable. And then Jay shows up to save the day because he's Patty Jenkins' golden boy. So then he talks to the sailor dude and he makes him back off, and he does. But the sailor dudes were playing pool at that time. For some bizarre reason, Jay decides to take off his sock, still wanted to like the cue, and put it in his sock. And as he's walking away with Fauna, she's like, "What are you gonna do?" And then the sailor boy is like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And then he like walks up to Jay. Jay turns around, smacks him as hard as he can with the sock filled with the cue ball. And then they hightail it out of there. Shenanigans, what can I say? So somebody at the bar points them in the direction of where they think Tamar might be living. So they go there. They don't see nothing. Then they see these two little white kids playing around. And then they ask them, "Hey, kids, do y'all know this lady named Tamar?" They take off running because they're scared. So then they head off on foot to chase them down. And they find this little like house type place. And lo and behold, here is Tamar. So, mother and daughter are now reunited. Tamara is excited to see her. They're holding hands. Tamara's like, this is a great moment. And let's just like walk on the beach and talk. Um, and you can tell Tamara is kind of out of it. Like she's not really. She's kind of like Karina. She's just out of it, you know. But she also has like this hippie vibe to her, you know. And so they're talking and everything. She asks her, you know, and this is the part where she's starting to get all the answers that Fauna now wants. Fauna asks her, "Why'd you give me up for adoption? Why did you put on there my father was an unknown black man? You know, who is my grandfather? Is he really a bad man?" And Tamar tells her straight up everything, you know. She tells her that she tells her that she put an unknown black man only because she doesn't really like white people. She admires black people. She likes black people, and she wanted Fauna to end up with a black family. And then she tells her, I forget the reason why she tells her she gave up for adoption. But I think it had to do with the George thing. She tells what happened between her and George when they was little and what he used to do to her. Fauna is horrified by this, and she's just like completely in shock and awe, and she just like let go of well, first they have a little spat. Something Fauna said, and Tamara's like, don't ruin this moment, you know, mother and daughter and I finally reunited, let's have this like good vibes and everything. And then she goes into the whole George thing, and then Fauna's like upset, and she just like takes off. And when she takes off, she finds and she's furious at this moment. She tells Jay, did you know what my grandfather did to my mom? Is it true? Oh no, I remember, because Fauna asks, is her grandfather her daddy and everything. And then that's when she runs off from Tamar and then finds Jay. And then she tells Jay, now, did you know that all this stuff, and this why we're really here and everything? Why did you keep this from me? And then Jay confesses that, yeah, he knew all along about the whole George and Tamar thing. And he knew that there's a possibility that Tamar's and George might have conceived Fauna. And Fauna is just furious because she just wants to know, why did Jay keep this information from her? And why did she, because she feels deceived. My problem with this scene is like, I get she's upset that he kept that from her, but why is she this upset? You know, because she had reasons to go to Hawaii too and find Tamar. And then now that she knows all of this, she's just upset at the fact. So this scene always kind of confused me a little bit. But let's put a pin in that for a second, and then let's get to the rest of Jay. So Jay, he goes to Tamar. He has to ask her a bunch of questions, and he asks her about the murders and stuff. And she has a bunch of pictures, not real photograph pictures, but like paintings and stuff. This is pretty much all he needs to kind of like try to, well, he has information that he needs, but it's not concrete information that will tie George to these murders. It's just like paintings and stuff. So then they go back to the States. Now for some truth that kind of pissed me off more about this show, and that one scene when Fauna gets upset at both Jay and Tamar. Now, in actuality, like I said before, when she contacts George on the phone, he tells her that Tamar is in Hawaii. And this, she finds this out at a very young age, like around 12. So her and Tamar, they talk on the phone, and they meet in real life a whole lot sooner. Now, I'm not sure when exactly she meets Tamar. I think it's around the time she's 24. That's when she actually meets her. When she actually goes to Hawaii and stuff to meet her, and she meets her new family. Now, Tamar was a very troubled person after all her dad did to her and stuff, and being at the detention center. She started a drinking habit. She started doing, she might have started doing drugs. When she went to Hawaii, she got into an abusive relationship with this man who she got married to. She later left him, found another man, and had more kids. Her daughter, Deborah, said that Tamar put her in a life of child prostitution, and that she would leave her because at this time George was also in Hawaii too, and so cause he later fled there and lived his life out there. And apparently Tamar and George, they were constantly contacting each other when they was living in Hawaii in real life. And Deborah said that, you know, her mom would leave her to the advances of George and stuff. And it's just like her mom sadly just was like a very troubled person. And then her family says that her mom lies, or that Tamar lies a lot. So when Tamar and Fauna did meet in real life, also they didn't have like a very good like meeting, I guess you could say, because her family told Fauna that Tamar lies a lot, and that so Fauna didn't really know what to believe. She would ask if George was her father and her grandfather, but Tamar kept telling her, no, 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 no. Your father is just a white man who assaulted her like a long time ago, and that's where you came from. But Fauna doesn't really necessarily believe that. But she also doesn't want to believe that her grandfather is her father. Till this day, nobody knows who Fauna's real dad is. She hopes it's not her grandfather. But for some bizarre reason, they never took a DNA test. But like I said before, that was back in like the 70s when she met her mom and stuff, when she was like 24. So back then, I guess they really didn't do DNA testing all that much. And they didn't do the cotton swab in the mouth thing. Back then they used to use blood test type stuff. And I believe George died. And somebody died in 91. I can't remember who it was. It might have been George or it might have been Jimmy Lee. I'm not really sure. But I know somebody died in about around 2000 or so. Now, like I said, I don't know if George died first or Jimmy Lee died first. But somebody died around 1991 and then somebody died around like 2000. I think George died in like 2000, I think. I believe. That's what I read. And it was Jimmy that died in 91. So for some reason, they just never did. So as they're back in the States, Fauna is still pissed at Jay. And Jay's all like, look, I'll take you home, but I gotta stop off at my contact place first, and then give him the information that your mom told me and stuff. So she waits in the car and he goes inside. And right from the start, you get this weird feeling because his contact isn't his like normal self. And as they're talking, he constantly keeps asking where the girl at, where the girl at, because his contact desperately wants like Fauna to take like a blood test to prove if she's George Hadel's like daughter or not. And so those two are like talking like constantly, and he's like, no, I'm gonna leave the girl out of this, and he's like, no, what, we need the girl. And it's kind of like, well, what is going on? Why is he constantly wanting Fauna? And he's starting to look like he's starting to sweat a little bit. And then we find out why. In comes that crooked, dirty detective cop with the big scar on his face. And so they like assault and arrest Jay. And you know, his mentor dude tells him like, I'm sorry, man, you know, they got to me and stuff. And you know, I had to do what they say. So it's like his mentor dude didn't want to do it, but he did it anyway because he didn't want to get arrested or die. And that's why he wanted Fauna so bad, because if they can prove that, you know, George Hadel is her father, then they can probably tie him to the Black Dahlia thing, which that still doesn't make no sense to me. How does an incest trial tie into a gruesome murder? I mean, I get it because they never explained in the show that they tapped his phone and everything else. That happened in real life. But he made that weird confession, like just in his house rambling to himself. That's never shown in the show. They should have did that, but they didn't. They wanted to create this whole like slashery Hannibal type style type thing in the show. So as they're back in the States, Fauna is still pissed at Jay. And Jay's all like, look, I'll take you home, but I gotta stop off at my contact place first, and then get him the information that your mom told me and stuff. So she waits in the car and he goes inside. And right from the start, you get this weird feeling because his contact isn't his like normal self. And as they're talking, he constantly keeps asking where the girl at, where the girl at, because his contact desperately wants like Fauna to take like a blood test to prove if she's George Hadel's like daughter or not. And then so those two are like talking like constantly, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna leave the girl out of this," and he's like, "No, what we need the girl." And it's kind of like, well, what is going on? Why is he constantly wanting Fauna? And he's starting to look like he's starting to sweat a little bit. And then we find out why. In comes that crooked, dirty detective cop with the big scar on his face. And so they like assault and arrest Jay. And his mentor dude tells him like, "I'm sorry, man. They got to me and stuff. And I had to do what they say." So it's like his mentor dude didn't want to do it, but he did it anyway because he didn't want to get arrested or die. And that's why he wanted Fauna so bad, because if they can prove that, George Hadel is her father, then they can probably tie him to the Black Dahlia thing, which that still doesn't make no sense to me. How does an incest trial tie into a gruesome murder? I mean, I get it because they never explained in the show that they tapped his phone and everything else. That happened in real life. But he made that weird confession, like just in his house rambling to himself. That's never shown in the show. They should have did that, but they didn't. They wanted to create this whole like slashery Hannibal type style type thing in the show. So Fauna sees him get dragged off, and then she makes her way back to Big Mama's place. And about to say Big Mama's house. Anyways, so at this point, Fauna calls Jimmy Lee on the phone, and it's nighttime, and Jimmy Lee's cooking a steak on the skillet. And I bring that up because of a very interesting reason. And so Fauna is telling her, like, I just want to come home. I don't like my real mother. My real family sucks, and I love you, Mama. Like, you my real like mom and everything. And and Jimmy's kind of like, she's touched by this, she wants Fauna back. But then it cuts to Fauna just talking on the phone, and we hear Jimmy Lee on the phone talking about, well, you got your new family now, and you stay with them, blah, 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 something like that. And she hangs up the phone. And we're kind of like, well, why did Jimmy act this way when she was acting all nice at first, telling her to come home? And then we see why. George is in Jimmy's house. And she said all that because she doesn't want him to know that she was talking to Fauna on the phone. And so he's there, he's talking, he's being his charming little self, and she's being her cavalier type self, trying to like, try to do her best not to like anger him and stuff. But then as that's happening, he starts to pick up a knife and he starts to play around on his finger, and he's all like, "Oh, this isn't sharp." So then he goes and finds like the sharpener. She quickly gets like more cooking oil and put it in the skillet and cranks it up. So he starts sharpening it, and then he starts asking her like questions and stuff, and of course she's lying to him, and he can tell. And he's doing that whole creepy Hannibal thing where he's still calm, collected, right before he's about to make his kill. So then a knock at the door happens, and then what's her name starts screaming at the door. So then he turns around, and then she throws like the grease skillet and stuff on him, and it burns him a little bit, but he kind of blocks it and shoves it off. Then she's running, and then she trips and falls, and then he just starts stabbing her over and over in the back in a slashery horror movie kind of way. And then he runs out, and that man who was her next door neighbor comes in to save her, and we see her just drowning in a pool of blood. Of course, just to let y'all know, this never happened. Never, ever, 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 ever. Her, like, Jimmy Lee and George never had this encounter. He never stabbed her over and over. It never happened. They only did this to build up suspense in that very Hannibal type style, because that's what they're going for in these last two episodes now. And it's kind of like, why? Why do this? I get you want to be like dramatic and all this stuff, but it's not needed. It just took the show in a completely different direction. So then Fauna calls Karina up, and she asks Karina, I need some money to get back home. Will you do that for me? And she's like, sure, I'll do that for you. But I'm not coming to pick you up in that black neighborhood. You have to come and find your way over here. And there's a reason for that. See, when Jay and Fauna got back to the States, we start to see tons of smoke just building in the air, like everywhere, like huge smoke and flames. And I'm just like, well, what in the world is going on? And then we start to see cars burning. And then we start to see black men running in the streets with red armbands on. I'm just like, are these the Black Panthers? Apparently what's going on is that the black movement, or I should say the Black Power movement, was starting to happen around this time. It started happening like the late 50s, like mid 60s and 70s and all through like that. So yeah, that's going on in the streets right now in the show. And white people are terrified now. And also black people are also terrified who are not part of that movement and joining them. And I was just kind of like, did this even like really happen like in real life to like Fauna and stuff? But I'm kind of like, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, in the 70s maybe, yeah, because she did go to Hawaii and then she did come back. So maybe when she came back, the Black Power movement was going on, but it was just kind of weird that this happened like so early on in the 60s. I mean, it did happen in the 60s, but it really didn't start kicking off till much like a little bit later, and stuff. So that's going on. That's why Karina was scared to go in like a black neighborhood or just go anywhere in general. So Fauna meets up with Terrence, and she's all like, hey, can you take me to like, my rich step grandmother's house? And he's all like, why don't you get your white boy to take you? And then he's pissed because she went to Hawaii with Jay. But he's jealous though. I'm just like, when did Terrence start liking her? Like, I don't recall them two ever like flirting or nothing like that. But anyway, because that was like Nero that liked her. So anyway, he agrees. And it's a very, in the way he takes it, is a very creepy and chilling way. We never see him drive the car. We only see Fauna in the trunk in complete darkness. And as this is going on, we can hear the stuff going on the outside. He had to stop for because the Black Power movement was crossing the street. And he's shouting at them, telling them like, leave his car alone and stuff like that. And they're all like, they were just shouting like, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem and stuff like that. And they were just like attacking like whoever they wanted to. So then it cuts from that and it goes into Karina's neighborhood, and she's still in the trunk. And and they're in Pasadena now. And Terrence is scared to be in Pasadena because they are very racist over there at that time. And he tells Fauna, like, at first, he didn't want to take her there because do you know what they do to black people in that neighborhood? But she begs him and then he takes her. So when he takes her there, he's about to get her out of the trunk. And then comes like this white dude just walking his dog or something like that. And Terrence is like scared. And then Fauna is scared in the trunk. Because we know if he opens the trunk and there's like a white girl in there, yeah. But the dude is being nice to him and telling him, you don't want to park here because your car will get towed away. And then he leaves. And then she gets out the car. And when she gets out the car, she gives him a kiss on the lips. I'm just like, where did this come from? Like, they never showed no interest in these two liking each other. It just completely came out of nowhere. And it was only written in for the show because I think in real life his character is based off Billy. But then it's like there's no build up to that. So it just, now they're getting into closer to towards the end and they just cram as much stuff in they can. Like, I don't know. So when she makes herself into Karina's house, Karina tells her to sit down. She wants to talk to her for a little bit and she offers her a drink. The moment I saw Fauna, take that drink. And I didn't see Karina take a drink. I knew something was up, but I didn't know exactly what was up. And then they're talking some more. And then the moment Fauna sees Karina put her drink down without taking a sip, she looks at her like in a weird kind of way. And it kind of pauses a little bit. And then, Fauna starts to fade out and pass out. Karina has now drugged her. And I'm just thinking to myself, and as she's falling asleep, she hears Karina say, "Don't eat any food that he offers you." We know who that he is. It's George. And I'm just like, why? Why did Karina betray Fauna now? And gonna send her off to George because she's been trying her best to keep Fauna away from him and stuff. So why all of a sudden would she betray him? And of course, this is only done to set up a more slashery type, like series finale type thing. But in a way, it's kind of harpers to the whole Dorothy saying that Tamara is a pathological liar so George can get away with everything. So Fauna wakes up and she's in like I forgot what they call this thing. It looks like a nightgown, but it's made of silk. I think they call it like a slip or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a girl, so I don't know. But anyway, so she's in that. And then I'm just thinking to myself, when she wakes up in that and her clothes on the counter, I'm just like, oh God, did he do something to her? But it's never like alluded to or nothing like that. It's just that. And so she puts the clothes on and she meets him downstairs and they talk a little bit. And he tell her, oh, everything Jay and Jimmy has told you, it's a complete lie and everything. And I've been exonerated and all this other stuff. And, I'm a good man. And Tamara, I don't know what Tamara has told you, but, I send her money like all the time. And me and her like are really good and stuff. And I never done anything to her. And then she's all like, well, I want to go home now. He's all like, well, you can't go home because you are home now. And you are my granddaughter. And, now you're about to have a good life here and stuff. And I think he tells us something about sad what happened to Jimmy. I heard that she got like hurt or something like that. So she's all scared and stuff. And then I can't remember what he has like a person come to the door and it's that crooked cop dude and they're talking. And so it's kind of like, I forget what they talk about, but then he tells him something. I think he tells him about Jay or something like that. And she's listening and she's all like, you're a cop. Why don't you like help me or something like that? And then he doesn't because he's a crooked cop. And so he tells her to like, go downstairs and get ready, and because something's about to happen. He wants to paint her because he's an artist and everything. Oh, I forgot to mention about Jay. So Jay, he's being interrogated right now, and he's getting the crap beat out of him left and right by all these cops. And so finally he's all like, all right, look, guys, I forget exactly what he's confessing to, but he said, look, because one of the cops is playing around with a knife, and he's all like, I think that was a knife that he used to kill what's-the-face. So he's like, look, I will take, I think he said something about, like, y'all are cops. You took like this oath, you're supposed to protect people, and now you turn against that. Like, what does George have on y'all? He's like, look, he just wants to protect that girl or something like that. He's like, he will confess to certain murder and put his prints on a knife if only they will let him go and transfer him to another place or something like that. I forget what. So they agree. And he puts his prints on like this knife. And as he is being transferred to a new facility, he's able to fight his way off, I think, through like 4 cops in the car. Because there's 2 in the back. No, there's 1 in the front driving, and there's 1 in the passenger seat, and there's 1 next to him. So it's either 3 cops or 4 cops in the car. And he's able to like smack one and disarm another and all this other stuff. I'm just like, how is he able to do all this while, getting a snot beat at him before and him having PTSD and stuff? So he fights his way through all the cops, and then he takes one of their guns and he hightails it to what's his face is in George's place, because one of the cops tells him that he's been reunited with his granddaughter. So now we're in this weird, creepy little basement place. It looks like a surgical room, and George and Fauna are down there. And he tells her, you know, I'm an artist and I want to paint you and this and that. And if you get me into trouble, he shows her a gun on his holster. And he tells her, like, go behind, like, this sheet curtain thing and get undressed and put this little nightgown slip thing back on. So as she's doing that, and she's like pleading with him like to get away, but he doesn't want to, and he's like, you know, I will shoot you and stuff like that. So when she's walking away, she sees this giant ball thing. I don't know what it is, but it's like a giant, like, porcelain ivory looking ball thing, and she takes it with her. And well, he doesn't look when she grabs it, and even people in the camera don't really know either. So when she comes back, she's sitting down in the chair, and she has her hand behind her back, and she's acting scared and crying, and she's asking for like to dry her tears or something like that. So he gives her like a rag or something like that, and he starts like painting her, and then she puts like the ball in the rag, and it's a callback to when Jay knocked out that Navy dude with the cue ball in his sock. So then she starts being defiant towards him, and telling her she's not gonna do this and she's not gonna do that and all this other stuff. And he walks up towards her with I think a knife in his hand or something like that, a surgical knife type thing, a scalpel. And then she takes it and then she smacks him in the head with it. He goes down. She tries to run off, and he grabs her and then she smacks him in the knee. And then he goes like down, you know. And now he's in pain and he's in agony. And then she grabs his gun and she points it at him. And then this is the part that's just so bizarre and weird. This is like she's taunting him. First of all, how did a 90-pound-year-old girl who's never shown any type of physical attributes now able to take this grown, like 150, 180-pound man down, you know? Yeah, he's old, but still. We've seen him take down Jimmy Lee and everything, and she's about his age, so it's like, you know, or younger. And so it just never made no sense. So she takes him down, and then it's this big empowerment, like, triumph thing where she's like just berating him, talking about how he's a hack, how he's an amateur, how he's no real artist, and how Karina is the true artist because she gets art, and her style is beautiful and all this other stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, Karina just drugged you and brought you to this man. So why are you praising her? Patty Jenkins' husband lost his mind when he wrote this part. And then she taunts him more with the gun, and then she decides, you know what? I'm not even gonna kill you. You're not even worth it. Well, what's the point of all that? So then she leaves him there, and she walks out the house. And then she's greeted just in time by the golden boy, Jay. And then he has a gun in his hand because he stole the cop's gun as he fought them off and stuff. And he's all like, you know, where's George? Where's George? He's all like, left him inside. And he's all like, I have to go get him. And then she's all like, no, just like leave him there. So he runs back because now he has to be the golden boy to save the day and everything. And when he goes there, Jay is gone. And then he starts having his little PTSD flashback. She kicks him out of it. They walk out the house. They're talking a little bit more. And then this is where the really strange part happens. They're talking, and all of a sudden, you know, they part ways, and then he walks off into like, it's like this fog everywhere all of a sudden now. And he walks off and he disappears in the fog. And as she's walking away, she is greeted by all of these military soldiers. But it's a hallucination. But it's not her hallucination. It's Jay's hallucination. So she's walking past these men, and sometimes we'll see them disappear and this and that, and then she goes off in the fog. And it's like, well, if Jay's already left, why is the hallucination still going on? Like, what is the significance of this part with the military soldiers walking in the fog and them parting away? Like, that don't make no sense whatsoever, and it just completely confused me. And I truly believe Patty Jenkins, like I said, husband lost his mind when he wrote this part, and poor Carl Franklin, he had to direct it. So it's making him look like an idiot, making up this scene that makes absolutely no sense. But then again, he directs a lot of stuff anyway that makes no sense, because he directed 13 Reasons Why, and he was part of that project, and only the first season of that is good, so, and everything else after that just sucks, so, yeah. Then we get to this long, like, narrated montage type thing of where everybody's headed after that. We see Terrence and Fauna now greeting Jimmy Lee in the hospital and telling her, like, I'm home now, I'm your child again, this and that. I'm just like, why is Terrence there? Like, why? Why? Like, why? There was no build up to them two liking each other. This came out of nowhere. And with Fauna and Terrence now a thing, I guess she forgot all about that dude in her hometown. So that's gonna be awkward. And this montage of her narrating is a letter to Jay. She has now tracked down Jay after so many, like, I think weeks or months or something like that. And Jay is in Hawaii for unknown reasons. And so she's writing a letter to him, and I don't know what the letter is talking about when she's narrating. I'm just not paying attention at this point. I'm just like, screw you, show. And so then, like, then we get a montage to George, and he is relocated somewhere, which looks like Hawaii too. And we see him with his assistant. Now, I forgot to mention he has an Asian assistant. She doesn't really do nothing in the whole show, but she's there now, and she's putting up his stuff. I'll get to that later, a little bit pinning it. And then it montages back to her talking again, and we see her, and then it montages once again to like Jay. And I think they show maybe like a clip of like Tamara probably, and then it's Jay again, and it's a sunset, and then it goes to her, Fauna, and then she's looking outside, and the sun is coming up, and then it ends just like that. And I'm just like, why? What just happened just now? It was just like the most bizarre type ending, and they tried to like wrap everything up in a nice little bow, and it's just like, huh? So now it's time to explain a little truth. Now, the Asian assistant. Now, after George was when he was exonerated and everything, he was later connected to the Black Dahlia murder. He decided to flee America, and I don't think he ever came back. And when he moved to Hawaii in real life. And when he was in Hawaii, he met the Filipino lady he got married to. That's his assistant in the show. But it's never, like, explained. And him and her had kids. Jeez, he's had a lot of kids. I think he's been married 4 times. And I believe he has a total of, like, 9 kids. Like, all together. Yeah, he's been married 4 times, and he's been, like, has a total of 9 kids all together from, like, all his different wives and stuff. Now, his son, who is Fauna's uncle, named Steve, he is now a former detective turned private eye, and he believes that his dad was responsible for the Black Dahlia murder and tons of other murders that was never solved. Because George Hodel is somehow mysteriously linked to the Zodiac killer. Like I said, this whole thing is just like nuts. Like, you know what I'm saying? Now, one thing the show did not want to emphasize on is that, okay, when Tamar had Fauna, she was 16. Fauna herself had a terrible teenage life. She dealt, like I said, with prejudice, racism. She dealt with, she was assaulted herself. She had a baby at 16. And then, like, she got married, and then her and her husband, at 16, her and her husband had, like, a baby. And she married a black man. That's the Billy dude, who's like the Terrence in the show. And her child, of course, is biracial, black and white. And that's the oldest one. But she has a second daughter from a white man. And her 2 daughters about, are they 20 or 30 years apart? I can't remember. One is 33, and the other one, I forgot how old she is. So they're about 20 years apart. And ironically, in real life, this is what's strange. The reason why Jay, they put him in Hawaii, is because in actuality, Fauna later on moved to Hawaii. Now, this is kind of weird. Tamar's living in Hawaii, Fauna and her family's living in Hawaii, and George is living in Hawaii all at the same time. So that's just kind of weird and doesn't make no sense, especially if he is who they say he is, you know. And but sadly, Fauna did die in 2017 through the breast cancer. And oh no, wait, her husband never moved to Hawaii with them. That was like that's when she moved by herself and with her child. Now, as for the whole George and her encountering each other, that did happen in real life, but it did not happen the way it did in the show. In the show, it's shown that George met her first at a bus stop when she was a teenager trying to get to California. And then he met her again at the art show when she was looking around the corner. Now, in real life, like I said, Jimmy told her there was a chauffeur dude always following her, and then she always used to see this man's face. When I believe she was about 24 at that time, and her first daughter was somewhere, and they got approached by this older man, and he just stood looking at them, staring, but he didn't say not one word to her. He just stared, and then he just put his head down, turned around, and he left. And she didn't know who this man was. So when she went home, she started looking at old photos, and it turned out it was George. So that's their first and only encounter in real life. All that stuff that happened in the show with her encountering him never happened. Never at the art show, this and that. Patty Jenkins said that she wanted to create this show about 10 years now and was never able to, and then finally was able to. And she talked to the real Fauna. And not to wonder if the real Fauna was able to see this, but she was not. How would she feel that they took so many like liberties and turned this into like a slasher type thing? Because it is so far-fetched from what really happened in real life. Now, the real life actual story is so fascinating. And they could have made like a whole like mini series out of that, but longer. They could do like a whole season worth probably like 12 episodes or maybe 20, or made like a movie, like a Lifetime movie out of that or something like that. So it's kind of like, why create all this fictional stuff and the character of Jay to make him this big hero type dude where he could have had his own show and not just focus on Fauna? Her story was so fascinating, you could have literally made the entire thing out of that. And what they should have did was depicted during like different points in time, from when she found out that she knew she was adopted as a little kid, from her finding out who her grandfather was at 12, show all throughout her life how she was like hated on all because of the way she looked. And then in her adult life, show that when she met her real life mom, and like and like more about her lineage and stuff, and then they could have even, and then they really wanted some suspenseful, oh my god, shocking moments. Then they could have did the whole people following her type thing, the phones being tapped, her cousin Johnny being mutilated and everything, her literally going to Hawaii and stuff and reconnecting with Tamar. They could show the abuse that she took from Jimmy Lee, and it's like there was so much they could have built on that. They built like a real dramatic movie, but instead they went this Hannibal slasher type route, and it was just so dumb. And then when it comes to Patty Jenkins' husband Sam, he hasn't written or done that much, and stuff that he has done I have never seen before. So it's like he is famous, but he's not known for doing much. Just like Patty Jenkins is not known for doing much. They're not really this power couple that most people are starting to paint them as and stuff. And it's kind of like, it's just like, this show could have been so much better in my opinion. I mean, I still think it's a good show. It's just not like a great show. And there's a reason why when you go like on IMDb, it has like mixed reviews to like, it's kind of like, I think it has like a 6.0 to like a 10 or something like that. And it's just like, people just really wasn't feeling it all that much. Like, and then once you found out the truth, then it's kind of like, well, why you just didn't put that in there? And why create Jay? Like, that just makes no sense to create his character. And like I said before, him being shoehorned into the show, not only did that take away from the Fauna storyline, but it took away from India's performance. And I have to say, she did some like a really good job in this show. And it's sad that this couldn't be her breakout role, and it really should have. And instead, it just re-solidified Chris Pine's status in Hollywood. And it's kind of like this should have been like just her thing. And even in promotional art, his head is shown larger. He's shown in more pictures. He's shown more in like the trailers. And it's just like, it was literally just the Chris Pine show. And he had no business making himself an executive producer, because of course he shoehorned himself in even more. And because him and Patty had such a great relationship, she shoehorned him in there, just like she did Wonder Woman 84. But you know, when it comes to the whole Fauna storyline, I gotta say that was one of the most unique things I've ever heard, because I've never heard of any story like this ever in my life. I've never heard of a person thinking they was like mixed and living with a different family of a different race, and then find out something's completely different. Because I remember they made a movie about this in 1991, and I didn't even know about this until I researched it. And the real life Fauna said, like, you know, she met this Korean man who lived in Japan, and he suffered prejudice too, because you know, over there Japanese people don't like Korean people or Chinese people that much. And so it's like he had a similar backstory to her, but not similar, you know. But it was just, they both felt like out of place and stuff, and he actually gave her the money to make the first movie and stuff. And the movie took a whole lot more liberties as well. It's shown, well, they changed everybody's name in that, and then they showed where like the parents are like adopting the baby, and the renamed Jimmy Lee was all like, that baby better not look white, and he's all like, oh, it's just a baby, how you gonna love him? And she's all like, well, you know, we're black and everything like that, and people gonna be like wondering and all blah 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 stuff like that. So it actually shows them adopting the baby from like an adopted place, and then like they know that never happened and stuff. But it's just like, I don't know, man. It's just like, it's a good show, but it could have been great. And it should have been like a whole lot better than like what it was. And it's just like, you know, I felt bad for the director, the last director in this, because he had to direct a lot of stuff that was just like crammed in there at the last like minute to make it seem like this big like slashery horror type thing. And it didn't even really come off that great, to tell you the truth. But yeah, that's my review of that. Well, alrighty. Well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.